We're now in week 7, and we're going to be discussing lifelong learning, not only as a strategy for student populations, but as a strategy for your own organization. And we'll be looking at the article, Lifelong Learning Will Be the New Normal, but are we ready? And that's going to be the important thing to consider for the future. In that article, they talk about people's growing lifespan and quite possibly 100 years of life. People will be going into tremendous changes in technology, tremendous changes in job skills, job change. Will their skills be obsolete? And most people agree that it's going to be important for students of the future and really any demographic in the future to upgrade their skills. And it'll be the valuable employees, the most valuable employees will be the ones that can combine technology and human skills. They'll have the ability to utilize technology, but they'll also know the human side, and how to blend those together in the most efficient and effective and caring manner. And everybody pretty much agrees that a new learning ecosystem will be needed. And that's going to be your challenge for the future, is to develop those strategies for a new learning ecosystem. So let's move on. The next article I want you to consider is Higher Education in a World Where Students Never Graduate. You might think, oh my gosh, students have to graduate. We need completers. But this is the whole concept of lifelong learning. And in this article, the author points out that college and universities have a very distinct advantage in that they have a deep bond with their students. Think back to your own college or university experience. I think back to my experience at Colorado State University, where I have 2 degrees. I think back to Idaho State University, where I have a second master's degree, and then University of Oregon, where I have my PhD. I have a tremendous affinity for those schools, and there is a deep bond. And what the author is pointing out is that we need to take advantage of that bond and work with the alumni, work with students who have attended, and see how we can develop programs and services for those students to keep them in the whole process of learning throughout their lifetime. Because if you're going to be living for 100 years and perhaps in the working world for 70 or 60 years, you're going to have to learn a lot of new skills and new techniques. The author also mentions that education will be in short blocks, but will allow for connections with the students throughout their lifetime to provide that lifelong advice or the lifelong upgrades to their way of thinking and the needed skills. And it'll shift to more of an on-demand type of learning, not only through computers, but even in-person situations where students will come back for shorter periods of time. So when we're talking, the very basis of our class is strategies for student support. And when we're talking about how do we develop strategies, here's a good example. Lifelong learning is a good example of how we're going to have to develop an all-encompassing strategy, utilizing all the different things we've talked about over the past 6 weeks of the course. how to develop that strategy that will encompass everything under perhaps the umbrella of lifelong learning. And the whole concept of higher education is in relationships. We're developing relationships, educational relationships, personal relationships with students that hopefully will allow them to gain value for the rest of their lives. And in the article it mentions Georgia Tech, some of the programs that they're having using higher education as a touch point model, that the student can always come back for the needed training, the needed skill development, the needed educational understanding throughout the student's life, and use Georgia Tech as a focal point for their learning. And I think that's something that all of us should consider, is that whole concept of the whole life of a person. And they mentioned something that I thought was really fascinating, is the fact that alumnus in Latin means foster child, meaning, okay, the student is someone who we're going to care for and nurture for the rest of their life. But this type of change will require completely different perceptions and outlooks on higher education and developing strategy if we're going to look at a student through the rest of their life. Now let's take a look at the article's strategies on becoming an adult learning focused institution. And again, let's look at this as part of an overall student support strategy. How can we become an adult learning focused institution, as well as all the other things that a college or a university needs to do, all the other different demographics, all the different aspects of the people that we serve. And the author mentions that students 25 and up are the fastest growing demographics in higher education. And so I think it is an area that we need to look at under the concept of lifelong learning, and understand that adults are completely different and have completely different needs and expectations than traditional students. I know my own experience with community colleges. We've seen more older students coming through in community colleges, although it has, our average age did come down a bit, but at any given time, it might have been, our average age was in the 30s of years of age for our students. And now, before I left and retired, it was probably about high 20s. And these students have different needs and expectations than traditional students. They're new. Many times I would talk to older students, and they said, I haven't been back in a learning environment since high school, and that was 30 years ago or 20 years ago. And so they had to be assisted and provided support to deal with that transition. And that's something that you really need to look at and think about the personal and situational needs that they might have. Many students, older students, would say, hey, I didn't do well before in education, and I'm not so sure I'll do well now. And they have kind of an attitudinal or dispositional issue about, I'm not sure I'm ready for this. I don't know. I don't want to be the oldest person in the class, and that's the way it's going to be. And at the same time, too, a lot of our institutions are structured for younger people, uh, residential campuses. We're only going to teach from 8 to 5, or we'll have some night classes, but that's about it. And really what we want to look at is the on-demand type of learning and developing skills for the future. So consider that as you're looking at overall support strategies. Is what are the demographics of your students? What's the culture? What's the age? Where are they from? What type of life experiences have they had? And look at how you're going to meet those needs. And again, with all the other people that you'll be supporting and serving, it can become quite varied. But it's an exciting time, and it's something that you can use your imagination. In this article, I want to point out they mention the Council for Adult and Experiential Learning, and they have principles for effectiveness for adult learning. And these principles will also provide you with a foundation for other groups that you serve. So use these, read through these 9 principles, and think to yourself, okay, if I was going to develop a strategy, what would be most important? Also think to yourself, how can we use these principles for not only training and providing that lifelong learning for our staff, but how can we use these for whatever groups we have, and really become an all-encompassing organization where you never stop learning and you're always seeking out to find the best solutions.